I will say. And one other thing that is so consistent is Monsanto's sense of style. We can call him the comedian as his moniker, if you will, but he's just the hat guy to me. Nothing can ever eclipse that. As strong of a Hearthstone player as he is, even if he were to become the World Championship this weekend, in my heart of hearts, he would still just be hat guy.
Absolutely. I think Monsanto put out a banger of a tweet leading up to the World Championship where he admitted that all his predictions were wrong with regard to the meta, except that there would be no old gods. And so he predicted that he would not win the World Championship. Love to hear a little bit of that wittiness, but we are getting into the game now. Monsanto with Foxy Fraud in the opener, Shadow Step, Questing Adventure. If he gets one combo card, this hand could be real fire.
And it's going to have to get going very, very quickly, though, because already for SilverName, we're seeing that brutal combo of Bone Chewer Brawler and Guardian Orc Merchant. It's so difficult for Rogue to chew through that because it's damaged, which of course means that the backstab cannot kill it off. Dagger to tank 4 damage feels absolutely awful. This is a very scary looking hand for SilverName to start off.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the fact that the damage is a double whammy. It gives the Divine Shield and prevents backstab, which is Rogue's main way of staving off these aggressive starts. For Monsanto, I really like that he ended up tossing the Questing Adventurer because it's going to be a long time before he actually gets the ability to buff it, because he's going to use a lot of these early resources to stave off the first couple minions from SilverName. And he gets greatly rewarded with a strong anti-aggro hand. I feel like this is the best you can ask for as Rogue in this matchup.
Yeah, super, super powerful to start things off. The Miscreant in combination with the Fraud looking very, very strong. But Monsanto is going yet further in, not waiting until turn 3 to go for the Miscreant. He's getting it online on turn 1, getting the double activation of Foxy Fraud. A very, very cool and unique interaction, often used with Edwin, as I think SilverName will be expecting here. And he gets the somewhat better news, at least, that it's Miscreant and not Edwin.
That is a full commitment from Monsanto. He gets the most tempo possible right here and even commits the backstab, which means that the Vulpertinger on its own cannot deal with the Foxy Fraud. So Monsanto is saying, this board plus 2 lackeys is enough. I don't need Shadow Step for the Miscreant. The rest of my deck will shore that up for me. And he's kind of treating it the same way you might approach a matchup against the old Pure Paladin, where if you just keep their board clear every single turn, they are significantly less capable of being able to swing, because the entire Highlander Hunter deck is built so that you assume that you keep the board from the very beginning. So I like the approach from Monsanto.
Yeah, me too. I think the other very clever thing about this line is that it makes pretty much every lackey good. If you get one of the tempo lackeys, like Goblin, Kobold, Titanic lackey, great, you're locking the Hunter out of the game. If you get the value lackeys, like Draconic or Ethereal, great, your hand's empty. You need more value to be going for it as well at that point. So I think it's covering all bases no matter what the outcome, and he should be able to carry on, staying ahead, and getting a Shadow Step as well for yet more lackeys. This is a disgusting start for Monsanto.
You got the step anyway. I mean, I want to stress how big the backstab was there, because protecting the Foxy Fraud meant that SilverName was not free to simply drop the Bone Chewer Brawler, and he was instead forced to break apart the Bone Chewer plus Og Merchant combo just to be able to stave off the board. Monsanto now is able to take that value trade and just have lackeys for days. For SilverName, I already feel like it's going to need to be some type of Zephyr swing to get him back into this. Trick Totem is interesting, though.
Yeah, I'm thinking Zephyrus. I'm thinking maybe Polkel if he gets a good draw before that. Obviously, okay, that's all right. You don't really want to be drawing Bran off the top for 7, but it just means he's not drawing 1-drops and secrets every turn. He's actually finding some kind of powerful option, at least with the 3-cost and 4-cost draws that he would be getting after Bran. But like you say, some kind of a miracle needs to come in for SilverName, because this is an absolute clinic from Monsanto.
The weapon is a decent draw. At least he gets to use the mana efficiently. At this point for SilverName, I feel like he has to rely on the Trick Totem to be actively bad for Monsanto. I don't want to sink 3 damage into that, so I'm just wondering whether the weapon and the trade goes in the Miscreant, or maybe just trades a minion into the 1/1 and you hold the weapon.
You never know. It might Soulfire Monsanto's own face or something like that in order to pull SilverName back in the game. It's honestly approaching the kind of point where you have to leave it up and hope for something bad, as you said. Especially it's just like Eaglehorn Bow, clear off the Miscreant. It's about as good as you can expect at this point in the game, I think.
Yeah, when the follow-up with double 2-drops, you very much expect your Dwarven to die by that point, but the Miscreant, if left up, is just going to wreak havoc on any other small minion that SilverName plays for the rest of the game. Feels bad to play defense as Hunter here, and Monsanto has so many options.
Oh, he is just begging for a Witchy Lucky to get rid of this trick totem. He knows that this is going to go wrong eventually. Like, it only needs one truly bad one and things start to really go wrong for Monsanto.
He
Obviously,
taunt it up,
good.
Although it's, of course, much more tempting to taunt the Faceless Lackey for the value trade.
Sure.
Okay, Micro Machine is an amazing outcome here. It has a 50% chance of buffing the Trick Totem, and he gets a premium outcome. Hello?
That's my Monsanto. That's what I've been missing. I needed my fix. I've got it. I'm good.
You gotta love his reaction.
And that's my SilverName as well. Already 3 or 4 turns into the first game, and already we're getting the salty reactions, which, admittedly, in this instance, I think is fair enough. This has been a brutal start for him to the tournament.
Yeah. SilverName is also just holding onto the ooze here, trying to... I don't even know if weaving it in is a valid strategy at this point.
Like, Betrayal does something. I honestly don't think he really needs the value of cutting class that much.
Yeah, he has Jandice for the next turn. I mean...
Yeah.
At this point, SilverName is not even gonna stick a minion, so maybe you just take Cutting Class.
Yeah, like, the Cutting Class is what I'm considering because of maybe exactly Zephyrus into a clear at some point in the future, at which point you might need extra card draw, but that seems very, very fringe. I think one of the tempo options does seem a little bit more sensible.
Yep. For Monsanto here, I don't mind the Bone Chiller going in and daggering up here. Maybe taking the face damage is a bit superfluous. If SilverName is hero powering this early, maybe Monsanto, on the off chance the Jandice gives some very bad outcomes, would end up flooding his board with low health, low attack minions, and then is not able to raise. I am really grasping at straws for SilverName to find a win condition here.
For sure. We need to start thinking about like what Zephyrus would offer if found as the outs for SilverName, because I mean on this 3-mana slot it's a little bit awkward actually, to be honest, in terms of what it could offer. You're more waiting for Shadow Flame, Holy Nova, something like that on turn 6 to try and swing this one around.
Right. Maybe something like Lightning Storm would be the offer here if it were even in hand. We're creating a problem for SilverName that he would like to have. He doesn't even have that option. Inconspicuous Rider, if that pulls Snake Trap, maybe there's a way back into this.
I appreciate the optimism. We're at that level again. I'm just trying to find any way. But it's not happening. SilverName right at the start, you know, and we were talking about time and again how SilverName, his lineup felt strong. But if you are going to be going for these aggressive decks, you need to be winning these kinds of games. Rogue getting a win at the start of this series would be backbreaking for SilverName, to be perfectly honest, because then he's got to take on the Warrior, which is a pretty bad matchup for most of his decks. He's got to take on the Highlander Hunter, which I guess would be his best chance of getting a deck to target. But even then, at the very least, he'd have to win a 50-50 of the mirror.
It is really brutal, and he got probably the worst outcome as well in Freezing Trap. Monsanto now is just Jandice, trade away the ooze, he can go face with the rest, and it's probably the easiest game of his life. The only real decision was what the turn 1 play was, and Monsanto absolutely nailed it. It was nowhere near the highest value play, but he right off from the mulligan was saying, I don't want questing this matchup. It's one of the few matchups where questing doesn't do much for me. I just want small minions, I want board presence, and the lackeys have carried him to victory. Yeah,
I think his start was just razor sharp from Monsanto. Absolutely on the money, as you have to be with this rogue deck. It's very potent, but it also is very finicky. You have to treat it right for it to treat you right in return. And as one of the better draws, I suppose, in SilverName's deck is found in Unleash the Hounds. He can stop some of the damage coming through and at least test the Booty Bay Bodyguard to see if Monsanto put it on that in a moment of lunacy.
Oh man, if this is considered one of the better draws at this point, it really just goes to show how hopeless SilverName's situation is. It deals with a grand total of 1 minion,
Yeah.
given that there are 2 big taunts in the way. And SilverName is really just hoping for Monsanto to put him out of his misery, but you did hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that the rogue getting out of the way is such a big deal, because I peg this as the weak link for Monsanto's lineup. I feel like on paper, at least as far as ladder stats go, it was unfavored against pretty much every deck in SilverName's lineup.
Pretty much. And for SilverName, it's honestly not going to get much easier as the bracket goes on. You know, if he gets through to the semi-finals, he's looking at very possibly going up against the likes of Yala, who has some reasonable amount of anti-aggro strategy with his OTK Demon Hunter, his ETC Warrior as well. I think would be a pretty disastrous matchup for SilverName to run into. And so again, it's just not looking good as a start for our representative SilverName from Russia.
The easiest Sinister Strike of Monsanto's life. But again, this is the World Championship stage, so even when you're in a position where it's 100% at first glance to win the entire game, if you have time to double check, triple check, you absolutely will take that time. That's why Monsanto here is still roping out at the very end.
Hey! Okay. Why doesn't Zephyrus know that Shadow Flame would do it here? I guess Holy Nova
does do it with the trade, yeah.
With the trade, you're all right there.
Zephyrus knows what the illusions are. No, of course not, but coincidentally, that is a board clear. But Monsanto, of course, has that Dirty Tricks loaded up, so he will very likely draw into threats.
Yeah, it was
Swindle, iconic combo for this meta.
It has to just be such a monumental whiff here for Monsanto to have, or for SilverName to have any real chance. Even Evil Miscreant on its own, perfect. More than enough pressure to put things back on SilverName to find an immediate answer. Even Dynatamer Bran off the top, I think he just loses that race quite convincingly. Yes, he would just be dead if you played that and didn't trade into the 3-2 on the following turn. Okay.
Oh, he'd actually got it. Oh man, insult to injury.
Yeah.
I mean, you do just go face here as SilverName.
Yep.
Just that's the only tiny slim percent of a chance he has of winning, but Monsanto has all of that damage stacked up. Even though it took maybe one turn later than I thought it would, it is going to be a very clean game 1 to Monsanto, who, now that he has the rogue out of the way, I think is looking in a great spot to win the series. Still has that warrior.
You're exactly right. We can start looking at SilverName's early game there, I suppose, because I was talking about the power of Bone Chewer plus Guardian Orc Merchant, which I do still think is something very powerful to hold on to. But you have to bear in mind that with this deck, you'll always find something good to do in the early game. The deck is almost all 1 and 2 drops, so mulliganing away quite aggressively is something that you should always be thinking about. So we could have seen him maybe try and find I don't know, Zephyrus, Lawkeeper Polkel, maybe even Dynatamer Bran in the starting hand. But I'm arguing for a case that I don't even necessarily myself believe in. It was just too strong of a starting hand from Monsanto, which does mean that he's able to get that rogue out of the way. Brutal way to start things off, but looking fantastic for Monsanto. He can pick up maybe for the Americas region where Bloodyface was unable to get the win in her first game. But for Monsanto now, he's going over to the Highlander Hunter himself, and he's going to be up against the Shaman on the other side from SilverName, a matchup that we are seeing all over on ladder at the moment.
It is true, and at the end of the line, I do tend to favor the Highlander Hunter in the matchup. I'm not sure if it's quite as drastic as ladder stats would put it, which is, you know, almost, I think, 59% for Highlander Hunter. I don't think it's quite that close when you have skilled Evolved Shaman players that are more willing to take less greedy lines with the Bogspine Knuckles. But I do think Highlander Hunter's consistency with the early mid, being able to put on that pressure and beat the Evolved Shaman before they can get to Bogspine Knuckles is pretty consistent. So I feel that the Evolved Shaman needs to not only have weapon, they need to have Lightning Boom on top of it.
Agreed. SilverName's list here, I think, is close to the money, but not quite the list I like. I think Revolve has quite consistently shown itself to just not be a good enough card in the deck. If you look on HS Replay, it's always right down towards the bottom of played and mulligan win rates. Whereas just having a little bit more minion presence in order to bolster your derailed coaster and just have more of a push when you do find the weapon is very important. But to be honest, none of that really matters when you find Cage Match Custodian, Dread Corsair, weapon for the starting hand. This is exactly what you are looking for with this deck that often doesn't try too much to fight for board in the early game, but rather swing things around once that weapon comes online on turn 5.
That is the juice for SilverName. Still looking for a Lightning Bloom, I think, to really make everything pan out well. But Monsanto's hand is not nearly as aggressive as I would expect to be the average here. Picking up a Secret is not great, but the Intrepid Initiate makes such a big difference here. Now he can put down a 3-2 and a 2-2 for this turn.
So with 2 cards being kept in the mulligan, I think you obviously cannot have a hard read on Cage Match Custodian whatsoever, but it's something to bear in mind. So you do need to be thinking, if I go coin 1-1, obviously initiate and then coin, it works out okay because you can trade in the Blazing Battle Mage if you want and then go face. Sorry, or even potentially just go Freezing Trap and then go max aggro right out of the gate.
I think that's the line for Monsanto here. Of course, if he doesn't pick up anything better to do for the next turn, and he does not, I'm much more in favor of Freezing Trap than Voracious Reader for 0 draws here.
Another rough draw for SilverName with the Bogspine Knuckles, obviously, and then drawing the other Bogspine Knuckles, so it's just a 2-2 left in his hand.
Imagine calling Bogspine a rough draw, but yeah, well, for this funny situation, it absolutely is. So let's talk about the downsides maybe of going for Freezing Trap now. I don't think SilverName has access to a rush minion for a very long time. The Derailed Coaster, if it gets Lightning Bloomed out, maybe, but that seems like a lot to ask for. So I'm in favor of this line from Monsanto very much.
Yeah, you were talking about the edge that Highlander Hunter has over Shaman, and I think it is in these first few turns until you enter turn 4 with the coin or turn 5. When Bogspine Knuckles come online, you have to be at the point of killing them, threatening lethal with Kill Command, Eaglehorn Bow, Hero Power, or they will simply blow you out of the game. They have just a better mid-game than you do. You have to go aggro.
Persistent problem here for Monsanto is that he doesn't have a good turn 3 though, and the turn 4 Rinlings is good in most situations, but I think Monsanto would much rather be looking for aggressive options to try and lock out the game here. Granted, the majority of his deck will be at least a minion that's playable alongside Voracious Reader or a good curve play. And he has the info now that the second Bogspine was already in hand.
Pretty good draw as well to find off the top. Allows you to just get that draw, with the Voracious Reader. Keep the pressure rolling and just hero powering turn after turn. So hard for SilverName to stand up for this, especially as he still does not have that strong play to go with Bogspine Knuckles yet.
It's coming down next turn though. Primordial is at least a cycle on the Fireheart. Lady Vaj.
It's the cheapest, which I think is worth more than anything else.
I agree. Aww, Scheme is far off from being able to do enough.
Is it? If it just does 2 damage, that's not terrible, right?
And would you give up the Bogspine turn in favor of that?
Yeah, I guess you just take Forked, probably.
I don't know. Maybe the Forked Lightning alongside something on turn 6 is where my head would be at. But I would hear the argument for Scheme because there's a line where you take Scheme, you still go Bogspine next turn, but then the Scheme would mess with your own board. It's quite difficult. I like the Forked Lightning pick in the end.
That, however, is a premium top deck for Monsanto. Even with the ability to draw an extra card on that turn if you tempered out both his 2-drops. Obviously, you are saving that for the Bogspine Knuckles on turn 5. It is backbreaking versus Shaman. That was such an important draw with the way this works out, because it just gives Monsanto an extra turn before that big pressure turn will come down, which means he's that little bit closer to Dino Tamer Bran and just locking out the game.
Monsanto had a small decision there as to whether he wanted to leave in the hero power, but I think this is one more turn where you can hold on in case of a Dragonbane draw, because even just double 2-drop on the next turn is not too bad whatsoever.
Yeah, he knows that he can spend at least 4 mana because Acidic Swampoo's will almost 100% of the time be playable to destroy with a weapon when it comes down.
SilverName is quite upset about the secret in play and just the fact that he can only evolve 1 minion, but that's the only line.
Well,
as for Monsanto's secret package, I think... Oh, sorry, this is off of the Rinlings, so SilverName can't really have that much info in the first place.
Like, there wasn't for holding on to the swing this turn because you go Derailed Coaster plus the Dread Corsair plus the Giant on the following turn in order to try and get maximum swing potential all in one go. But if they have the use, then you're just conceding on the spot, basically. You are going too slow at that point, if that is the line you take.
Right, and there's also just the value of having a minion that can attack on the next turn. So I do think SilverName went for the right line. The Ooze is just going to be the cherry on top for Monsanto here, though.
Brutal.
Oh man, take your pick.
They're all pretty good.
I think Cages has a good chance of going off.
Yeah, if you're destroying the weapon, Snipe is not too likely to get anything good. I think it's not like you're going to hit a Moog as the best case example. It's probably just going to be something small instead.
And Shaman doesn't play that many spells to begin with. There is that one Fireheart Discover that was left. But for Monsanto, I just like the idea of piling on as much pressure as possible. SilverName's reaction in 3, 2, 1. Yeah.
He knew what was coming.
And SilverName is a player with probably the largest individual fan base out of everyone in this tournament. He's honestly not a player that springs to mind immediately when you talk to me about top pro players, but in terms of his experience and just the fact that he plays a ton on stream very consistently should speak to also his ability.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've heard players talk extensively about... I mean, you know, during Grandmasters, it was no secret that SilverName wasn't practicing as much as some of the other competitors. That wasn't where he found his edge. It was just his instincts. They were so strong. He didn't even have to know a bunch of the matchups, and he would still just be making the correct play time after time. Even if some of his deck selection was admittedly a bit janky and maybe not where you want to be going for most of the time in Hearthstone, his instincts were, for the most part, very strong.
Did he... It's a free Sea Giant, though. I'm sorry to cut you off after singing SilverName's praises, but after the Snipe went off, there was one board space, and the Sea Giant cost 0 at that point.
Yeah, I think that was a missed Sea Giant there. Well, I mean, that goes perfectly with what I was saying about his great Hearthstone instincts, doesn't it, Gia?
Oh man, that could have been the difference maker, because this is actually a relatively dead turn for Monsanto.
Yeah. That one stings.
I think SilverName's reaction was, I'm not going to have board space to play Sea Giant anyway, so I'm going to take the trade, but he wasn't considering that Snipe could have been played. Oh, sorry. My bad. It was 1 cost, and then when the Pack Tactics triggered, that's when it went to 0. Gonna have to go back and look at that turn later on. But it very much feels like SilverName needs to generate taunt somehow, so I'm in favor of going for Bogspine and Prey.
Yep.
I don't think you can afford to think that this is an explosive trap. So
you're losing.
I would just attack with them anyway.
Yeah, I agree. You got to be taking those big old risks right now.
Gonna get the bad news. We're gonna rip you apart.
Well, he gets the taunt in play, which would have protected him against Dino Tamer Bran, but Zephrys off the top instead will do just as good of a job to close out the game. Monsanto goes up 2-0. He's got to win with the Rogue. He's got to win with the Highlander Hunter, and one after the other. Those were the 2 decks that I was saying maybe could be a weak spot for him. Now only left with the Enrage Warrior, the signature deck for Monsanto over the course of his stay in Grandmasters. At least it feels like to us. When everyone else was transitioning over to Bomb Warrior or whatever else would have been the flavor of the month at the time, he was sticking with this Enrage Warrior because he believed in the power of its strong mid-game combo style of gameplay. And I think, honestly, that's the deck I wanted SilverName to ban at the start. I think this has a fantastic shot of taking at least the single win that Monsanto needs to sail through to the winner's bracket match.
It's true. I definitely like the odds of this Enraged Warrior going up against the Demon Hunter on SilverName's side. Maybe the one matchup where it would struggle, it's that Evolved Shaman in particular. We are going to get word real soon on what SilverName ends up queuing. It looks like it's the Hunter into Warrior. So, Risky Skipper, I do favor a lot to give yourself more edge against any of these decks that run so many one-drops, but there are certain Hunter draws where you can go for a mid-range game plan that still gives it enough juice, I think, against the Warrior. So I'm thinking things like the Imprisoned Felmaw early on and trying to get maybe some of the 3-drops and curve out instead of playing a bunch of 1s.
Yeah, I think so. You have to bear in mind that there's a couple of other very, very powerful cards in this matchup. One that I think, interestingly enough, Shao Ti, in collaboration with Huntrace, was one of the first to discover, which is, of course, the Warmaul Challenger, as you can see right there in hand for Monsanto. So powerful against these small minions where you can just stick a 1-9, a 1-7, whatever it may be. Super powerful in those early game turns, which is why, as you were saying, I think the kind of cards like Animal Companion that's a little bit more meaty, Petting Zoo in the mid game, is exactly where SilverName needs to be lining up.
Well, I was saying, though, that there are certain Hunter hands that can get under the skin of the Pain Warrior, and this is one of them, the 1-drop into 3-drop. I was honestly eyeing the Bran as a keep there, but it did leave some questions for turn 2 because the secret is definitely lackluster there. So SilverName ends up tossing those 2 and is rewarded with a 1 into coin into 3 drop.
Yeah, looking pretty strong to start things off for SilverName. Monsanto, as is always the case with this Enraged Warrior, it feels like it's close. It feels like it's 1 or 2 cards away from an unbeatable hand, but you have to find them first. We're, of course, looking for Armor Smith, any kind of a weapon. I mean, even just on this turn, if the Warmaul Challenger can't be cleared, you're then looking at Shield of Honor plus the Bloodsworn Mercenary as well. So maybe this already could just be a winning hand for Monsanto.
I definitely like the look of the Warmaul Challenger, but SilverName picking up the Huffer here is making Monsanto's life a bit more difficult. I still think he'll end up on the Warmaul Challenger on a 1-1 as the play.
Yeah.
But now SilverName has maybe some options to try and just leverage the Huffer being able to go face for several turns.
So if it were to trade in, it would obviously be a 1-9 if it went into one of the Vulpetingers. So it wouldn't even be clearable with Sharpshooter hero power. You'd be in the territory of looking at Zephrys, I suppose, to try and get an answer. And even then, it would have to be like Soulfire, I suppose, in order to actually clear it off with what you have.
Yeah, my reasoning for leaving up the Huffer is we could just see a Risky Skipper without Armor Smith turn on the next turn. So 1 proc plus the attack from the Warmaul Challenger is most likely going to be enough to deal with the board anyway. So Monsanto would take a lot more damage in the near future, but maybe get to clear the board and stick a Shield of Honor. However, he is going to choose to respect the Huffer here, which in terms of the mana spent or what you achieved, it's 3 mana, summon a 1-2, deal 2 damage. It's still pretty decent, but I'm a little bit surprised by the discipline here.
There's so many things to consider, right? Because obviously, even if SilverName can't kill the Warmaul Challenger, a single Freezing Trap, for example, could just shut it down. If you go with Shield of Honor, Bloodsworn Mercenary, you're taking a lot more damage from the Huffer on the following turn. And I guess this is Monsanto effectively saying, as long as I survive, I don't die in these early mid-game turns where Hunter is at its peak, I should be able to win the game. My deck has a better mid-game, more value to be able to get over the finish line. Which, I mean, we'll have to see whether or not that is true. He's being very precious with his life total at the start, and I am yet to be convinced that that's the way to go.
Right. I mean, he's obviously taking the defensive posture and believes that that's the way to go in the matchup, but my concern is that it could just strand the Shield of Honor and the Bloodsworn Mercenary in his hand, because SilverName is very likely to deal with this Warmaul Challenger one way or the other, and I think the Dwarven Sharpshooter is the most convenient way of doing that. If he landed proper Demon Companion, that could have been a line as well. But I think SilverName is free to just maximize his mana with this type of start he's had, which is a bit more curve oriented instead of just vomiting one drop.
I think I can
draw
appreciate.
from Monsanto, though.
Yes, very nice draw there. I like holding back on the risky skipper, I think, because it has so many draws that just put it into turbo mode. You know, if you get Armor Smith, if you get a Battle Rage, that would be absolutely fantastic as well. Whereas just developing the board on your side feels a little bit more important and forces SilverName to strike that awkward balance between clearing off the board so his minions can actually stick and pushing for that lethal damage, which is always a possibility if they don't have the Armor Smith.
That clutch 1-cost card draw to make the turn pretty simple for SilverName. I think this is one of the few situations where using Dwarven Sharpshooter is great for him. He can take some value trades to end off the turn with as well.
Again, it's a difficult balance to strike. There's a lot of good value trades here that you can take, but then you're just making it so that a single risky skipper could deal with your board, and you also then haven't really answered, haven't dealt as much damage to face. So instead he's preserving as much life as possible on this Dwarven Sharpshooter, again, to play around the possibility of any kind of risky skipper clear.
I think that's very heads up. We have to note that, of course, this is Tempo, Pain, Rage Warrior, whatever you want to call it. So on top of there being the Risky Skipper package, there's the Blood Boil Brutes, which really punish you having gone for wider boards. So I like the idea of a SilverName going for that type of trade. Reaper Scythe could make work of the Dwarven Sharpshooter, however, which is the punish.
Yeah, I like this way of going about it. It means that, you know, just like a Polkelt developed, you can probably answer by activating the Spell Burst effect, cleaving away the 1/1 and answering anything that comes down on the board. And the Sword Eater just didn't cleanly enough answer the board, in my opinion.
I agree. And because SilverName knows that the Reaper Scythe is very likely to just get rid of any minion development, he's choosing to go for the secret development now. So Snipe is interesting because that can be, if you can set it up properly, a way to shut off a risky skipper turn.
Yeah. It's a really tough one. Like, I think I would just look most heavily at pack tactics, but you have to be bearing in mind that the way the weapon swing works would clear off all of the minions, right? Because it generates it first and then would get the swing.
Yes, that's correct.
So I think it's
that
a reasonable
played a lot
selection.
into SilverName's decision to take the Snipe in the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so Zephyrus can offer weapon removal if you really want it here. Probably not good enough. I think you're looking to get something heavier hitting with Zephyrus. Potentially this game could go long enough where Tyrion is an option.
Yeah, I like what you're
Like Zephyrus played on 7 with no mana left would offer Tyrion for the next turn.
That seems reasonable. Or, of course, if you do just manage to get yourself aboard, maybe a snake trap comes down, and then you can look at Bloodlust at any point to just try and sweep out the game. Although that is admittedly a little unlikely, with a risky skipper always waiting in the wings here for Monsanto.
For the next seek, I'm on board for Snipe again, honestly.
Yeah.
Just because Monsanto's big combos involve just playing skipper first in every iteration. There's not many minions left that would get frozen because Monsanto has already played one normal challenger.
Someone's gotta lead the charge.
Monsanto leads off with the Sky Raider because he's expecting Snipe once again.
Very nicely done. The South Sea Deckhand, funnily enough, gives him the clear, which is kind of a big deal, obviously. Not only because he doesn't want to face any more secrets, but because then SilverName stops pulling them out of his deck. He reopens the possibility of drawing the bad cards of 2-mana secrets from his deck. But obviously there's quite a lot that can go wrong that had been pulled from the deck to stop this from happening.
Alright, that is good news for Monsanto. He is able to go for a Skipper Armor Smith clear now. It's just a little bit mana short of being able to copy the Armor Smith immediately, though.
So if you factor in Dino Tamer Bran on the following turn, what is your thinking here? Because obviously if you just go for the Risky Skipper combo next turn, it's not going to clear the Dino Tamer Bran, which you have to be very, very afraid of. But with both of the mercenaries in hand, you can gain so much armor that maybe you can tank it for a turn.
Yeah. I think I would land on that conclusion as well. The board presence you get from going Risky Skipper Armorsmith right now is probably insignificant compared to the potential armor gain you get of just delaying one more turn. Even though you take the 3 on this turn, you get to gain way more armor on the follow-up and end up with a stronger board presence. And in the event that SilverName doesn't have Dino Tamer Brand, maybe you even milk more of his resources. But I'm definitely looking at the Tyrion line here. Okay.
SilverName has 2 ways to go at this, right? Because he was surprisingly close to lethal. I think he was about 5 off on that turn with Hero Power Savage Roar. And so you can either go for, as you said, the Tyrion line, get a big minion, start swinging every turn. Or just say, I don't think you have Risky Skipper. There's been no Ankar played so far. There's not necessarily an indication that it's even in hand for Monsanto. And therefore, going with this line where he has to have it to stay in the game, I think is reasonable, even if it's not going to work out right now.
So this is a secret that's actually from the deck because it's from the Inconspicuous Rider and not Rinling's Rifle. So Monsanto doesn't have to snipe anymore. Pack Tactics begins to become a concern though. Because obviously he's only able to play 2 minions after the Skipper this turn, I think.
So, yeah.
And so it's not an automatic clear on the Bone Chewer Brawler, but if you attack it with the weapon and it's Pack Tactics, they end up with just a bigger Bone Chewer Brawler at the end of things. So I think he's actually likely to Inner Rage the Bone Chewer Brawler at the end of this.
That's where I ended up at the end of all
Oh,
of
never
it.
mind. He can afford the Blood Boiled Brute.
Oh, well, there you go. Even better. Just able to sweep off the entire board. Doesn't even need the Inner Rage. And is just pushing forward huge amounts of damage in the coming turns. Up to above starting health total overall now. And SilverName kind of has to use this Zephyrus just to stay alive. I'm looking at Shadow Word Death now, I think, to clear his hand and make room for Voracious Reader to draw cards.
Brutal. And so you would end up playing the Voracious first with the Blazing Battle Mage. I mean, I think that's his way back into the game. SilverName does have quite a bit of health to work with. Strangely enough, this is Monsanto breaking up a lot of his combo pieces. If he goes Zephyrus first, I'm actually not sure what better removal option it would give here.
Upon closer inspection, I think I might actually be looking at Edwin instead. Just play out both the other guys and take an 8-8 to slam on the board. Like it value trades the 5-7, and you have enough health to play with. I think here is SilverName.
My concern with leaving up a big damage minion, though, is a lot of Monsanto's deck is activated by leaving up a minion of that size.
True.
Second Bloodsworn, Shield of Honor, etc. Sure.
Shield of Honor
in hand right now.
Yeah, Shield of Honor is absolutely backbreaking, to be fair.
Okay, Execute is, I think, the discipline play, but good on you for catching the Edwin. I didn't even think about that as a possibility.
Yeah, I think if Shield of Honor were not a possibility, you would just go for it that way. But in the end, he's going with the slightly more longer game plan, saying if you don't have that Battle Rage, which Monsanto does not, as it just so happens, SilverName very possibly could just move towards outvaluing him. It needs to be another cutting class, obviously an immediate activation of Battle Rage to get it done. But none of that is available to Monsanto. He's just running out of cards.
Yeah, I also don't know if Monsanto intended to swing the Voracious Reader for... Oh, sorry, yeah. This makes sense because he's able to Shield of Honor anyway and ends up dealing with the copy. So he just swung into the lowest attack minion and also gets rid of SilverName's refill.
As all in as he possibly can, it seems to be pretty much the only way to play this out from now on for Monsanto. And all of these damage cards for SilverName, Kill Command, that's not going anywhere near the face this game. He is going to be using that to clear off minions because this is purely about board control now.
Right. And the Mind Shield Armorsmith is definitely a pain, but he can start to pick this apart. The Petting Zoo is surprisingly effective here. And by virtue of there being 2/3/3s left up, the Bloodthorn Mercenary is almost certainly going to get value traded next turn, and this is strangely a value battle now, but Battle Rage is super clutch.
Such a big draw here for
Oh,
Monsanto.
that one
Sword Eater
too.
as well is insane.
I think it's lights out for SilverName. Well, he has some big draws still left in there.
Yep.
Dino Tamer Bran. But it certainly feels like we're headed to our third 3-0 match of the day. And this is only the fourth match of the day.
What has been happening? I mean, we were pegging both SYF and SilverName as having the lineup of the tournament. And, you know, SYF had a pretty easy ride against Bank Yugi, to be perfectly honest. His deck selection just didn't seem to be there at all. It's showing that this lineup still has signs of weaknesses. If we're talking about them being a favorite, it is small edges that are being gained by our competitors here, as it does just feel like a overall, you know, if you factor out how powerful Demon Hunter is when it can be banned away, a pretty tough metagame to read. It feels like there's a lot of options that are pretty balanced in their effectiveness.
True. To be fair, maybe I was calling it a little bit too early. Honestly, the warrior without that persistent damage hero power that Hunter has, oh no, I was gonna say doesn't have that much of a clock, but Monsanto's top deck quality is much higher than SilverName's at the moment. There's the Grom at the top end there, the second Blood Boil Brute. Any card draw effect is huge here, whereas for SilverName, it feels like Bran or bust.
Pretty much Zephyrus out of the pool now. That Unleash the Hounds is just a little bit too late. Something tells me he's not going to have time to press hero power enough times with or without Tour Guide. And so it does just look like Monsanto, again, the rogue being the weak spot, just sailing through with that super clean turn one play. That's got to be the play of the match for me. It was subtle, but it was just so devastating for SilverName.
To be fair, even though I did have SilverName's lineup pegged as favored in the series, I disagree with his ban. I think that the warrior should have been the ban at the end. I think overall it was still, as you mentioned, the rogue winning that defined the series, but I kind of think maybe SilverName could have gotten a bit more percent if he had gone for a different ban strategy. Unleash just giving Monsanto tons of armor. Brutal. So the thinking here for SilverName is if Monsanto's hand and next draw is air, and SilverName's next draw is Bran, the King Crush can value trade the Blood Boil Brute, maybe.
Maybe, if we're being very, very generous there. Like, I mean, with just the Anchor, he literally has the damage to just close out the game on the following turn. I think King Crush now is just locked out, so it is just simply lights out now for SilverName. I don't think there's a single draw that can pull it back in, which means at the end of our initial stage of matches, all of them now played out, assuming Monsanto can take the win at the end of this. It's a pretty even field, with the only real loser, sadly, Gia, being Asia Pacific, who are now down at 0-6 in terms of overall game scores. It has been a massacre so far.
That's true, but you know, it could still go according to plan, Derek, because I did have Sif and Bank Yugi going through in the bracket. So because Sif and Bank Yugi faced off in the first phase, one of them had to lose at that point. So it could still go at least half according to plan here. Glory, I think, will have a much different story as to how his lineup stacks against the rest of the field, because I think he did run into an unfavorable against Yarla, although Rodan and I are kind of disagreeing on how those lineups stack up.
Yeah.
But in any case, we have to put the spotlight into Monsanto's preparation and gameplay, because this is a lineup that, again, not a lot of people were expecting this archetype of warrior, and the secret rogue play at the beginning was pristine.
Yeah, I think it's honestly, it's easy to